How many of you out there have a series or franchise that you hold really dearly that just for whatever reason hasn't gotten a new installment in years? I'm talking at least a decade, Banjo-Kazooie, Earthbound, just to name a few. My point is, most, if not all of you, I'd bet, would have a series that is such the case. Kind of even going back to what I was talking about in the last video, developers and publishers, for whatever reasons, just don't feel the need to listen to their fans' demands sometimes and deliver a product that is getting demanded, begged for, wished for, you name it. For whatever reason, these series just lay dormant for years, left to wither and die by the wayside. Now, you may remember a video I did not too long ago called Ninja Gaiden 2, in which I spoke about my love for the game Ninja Gaiden 2. That is the 3D new series of Ninja Gaiden. And in it, I shared just how much I love that game and how much the combat and the crazy nature of the game just really can captivate you, even through some of the crushing difficulty and just overall brutal kind of game design. And I still hold true to that. I do still think that Ninja Gaiden 2, for as fun of a game as it is with exceptional combat, is still a pretty unfair and brutal game in a lot of senses that, while many people may love that about it, the average player is probably going to get more frustrated than it's worth at least on a first playthrough with Ninja Gaiden 2. Now, the last entry we got in the Ninja Gaiden series, at least this modern Ninja Gaiden series, was a re-release of games called the Ninja Gaiden Master Collection. I believe it came out a few years ago, but it contained different versions of Ninja Gaidens 1, 2, and 3. Now, in some cases, like the version of Ninja Gaiden 3 that were on this collection, Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, that is the preferred, general consensus, the definitive edition of Ninja Gaiden 3. However, the ports for Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 were called the Sigma versions, the Skibidi Ohio Riz versions, I guess. I hate that I just say that. The Sigma versions, though, were not the preferred versions for, just long story short, content was added in some cases that was not liked by some. Difficulty was heavily tweaked, specifically in the number of enemies that were on screen at once and the difficulty, the AI of said enemies. And the biggest one for most people, the change of gore in these games. One of the most beloved things about Ninja Gaiden, and especially Ninja Gaiden 2, was the amount of blood and just guts and everything that was splashing around on the screen. It was kind of very reminiscent of those, classic samurai, Bushido-style movies where blood was just littering the screen, And in these Sigma versions, they got rid of that blood, that gore, and I believe they replaced it with like a purple or blue mist. And it wasn't the same, Now, I would argue it's not a gameplay ruiner. It doesn't ruin my life or anything. And I would even argue, in many ways, I believe the Sigma version to be much better, at least for 2. And I know that's a contentious topic, and I may even be disregarded as a Ninja Gaiden fan in general from that statement. However, the game did make a handful of improvements that I believe make it much more enjoyable for the average consumer. For example, in Ninja Gaiden 2 Original, you had to do a lot of boss fights with a bow and arrow, and these were just the antithesis of Ninja Gaiden 2's gameplay philosophy, in my opinion. The game is all about fast, fluid, tight action. You're most often than not hanging on by a sliver of life. You got to use your sword, and you got to absorb these health essences that are dropping from enemies, and it's a very fast, fluid kind of gameplay style. And instead you have these bosses where you're just standing in one spot and you're very slowly chipping away a boss's health with a bow and arrow. And while Sigma 2 did not get rid of these bosses, at least not all of them, it did get rid of the limited amount of arrows, because yes, on top of how annoying these bosses were in general in Sigma 2, or in OG 2, you had a finite amount of arrows. And even this wasn't that big a deal in the original, because whenever you had a boss, there would be a body just lying where you could infinitely restock your arrows. So it was more just an annoyance than anything. Midway through the boss, you'd have to run over, get arrows, go back. So Sigma 2 just gave you infinite arrows. And, it's a welcome change in my edition. It also added some other, Changes such as, I believe there's an auto lock on for your arrows now. It added some content, some levels with some new characters. You can take them or leave them. But the biggest change for Sigma 2, again, like I said, was the just removal of gore in general, and also the amount of enemies. Now, OG Ninja Gaiden 2 is very infamous because at one time, it can almost feel like a Dynasty Warriors game, where there's just literally 20 enemies on screen at once, all just dogpiling you. And that is something that's very unique to Ninja Gaiden 2 in that regard. It's very, very challenging, but the average consumer, I don't think is gonna stick around for that too long. Like it or not, you can say get good or whatever, but it's not the most welcoming attribute. And I understand, that's not the point, right? It should be, this is what the game has to offer, rise up to meet it or don't. However, Ninja Gaiden as a series has been dead for years at this point. The last mainline entry was Ninja Gaiden 3, and it wasn't even that well received. But since then, crickets. Team Ninja has went on to make, different games, different endeavors, and it seems like Ninja Gaiden, although it had a few references here and there, such as in the Neo games, you could fight a character that was supposed to be, I believe, like a descendant of Ryu Hayabusa from the Ninja Gaiden games. It seems like Ninja Gaiden as a series was just a distant memory at this point. So imagine the shock and delight of the fans that would have come from the announcement of not just Ninja Gaiden 4, a brand new entry in the series after years, and not even a reboot, just picking up right where the series left off, with Platinum Games at the helm to boot, but also a full remake of Ninja Gaiden 2, and it dropped that day of the announcement. What an incredible moment for this dead series, right? To come back with such a bang, with a revengeance, a Metal Gear Rising revengeance, if you will. But that's not what happened. I don't know what is going on in the noodles of other Ninja Gaiden fans, but all throughout the subreddit, literally 30 minutes after this unveiling of the new game, people were ushering people, don't buy Ninja Gaiden 2. The remake, by the way, is called Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Don't buy Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. It's just Sigma again. Oh, this is bullshit. I hate this. And the biggest thing I saw touted around during this real just hate mob was, if a developer does not give you what you want, it is okay to complain. Now, I am all in the camp of arguing for what you want, letting the developer know what product you would like to spend your money on. Because at the end of the day, it's a product. And if the consumer doesn't like it, then that's it. I hate that mentality of whenever there's a Nintendo Direct, say, and they'll unveil something that nobody wants. There's this kind of taking up arms for the company kind of mentality of, we don't deserve anything. Nintendo's so lucky to give us even this, and it's a real slippery slope, I feel. Because yes, on one hand, you should not just be blindly accepting every single thing that comes down the pipeline, because at the end of the day, again, it is a product, and if consumers don't want it, no one's going to pay for it. But also, when it's a situation like this, where it's a series that's been dead for years now, hasn't even gotten a whiff of information, and it gets such a huge event like this, the series, what is better to you as a consumer? The series being slightly, not exactly what you want, or the series being completely dead? To me, the answer is pretty damn obvious. I want the series to be around. And that's truly what I feel the problem is, because it's not even as if Ninja Gaiden 2, or even half these games that are revived, it's not even that they're horrible. It's truly that one small thing I feel is off, and people will beg and demand everything to be shut down, and that the developers really fucked up on this one, and they'll just deny everything else that went into this game. Now, in the case of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, what is the problem? What is so bad? And as an avid Ninja Gaiden 2 fan, someone who's played through the game multiple times, who's played through the series multiple times throughout many years of his life, Ninja Gaiden 2 is an amazing game. It is the definitive version, in my opinion. Now, if it's not your favorite version, that's fine. But it is in no way a bad version or a game that you should be ushering people not to buy, actively encouraging people to not support this franchise that is trying to come back, that you're apparently a fan of. It's absurd. It is an insane response for people to have just this hate mob mentality of shutting down a game for one small change. Now, Ninja Gaiden 2, compared to the other versions, it has the extra levels of Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2. It cut away kind of the unnecessary bosses of Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, something I really, appreciated. It kept the infinite amount of arrows. Great. Love that addition. And it returned all the gore. What it did not return was the massive amount of enemies and the overly crushing enemy AI. Now, I don't know. I can't personally speak to that. I haven't worked my way all the way up to the maximum difficulty yet. But so far, in my opinion, it gets that good balance between fair and bullshit from the original. And that's exactly what I feel it should be. Not everybody in the modern era wants a ball-crushingly hard game. And yeah, you can argue for Ninja Gaiden fans, that's such a slap in the face, but it's not as though the game hands out victories. It's not like you're walking through the game and boom, 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 the game just gives you an A rank and you beat the level. No, you still have to try. I feel a lot of these people that are complaining the difficulty's too easy, I think people forget we're fans of this game. We've played through this game multiple times. This is not our first time playing the game. And I'm not saying that it's not, easier than OG Ninja Gaiden 2. I'm not saying it's, less enemies than OG Ninja Gaiden 2. But if I want to play OG Ninja Gaiden 2, it's still right there. And again, if you still don't like this version of the game, if you say this is not what I wanted, they didn't listen to what I wanted, fine. But why then go out of your way to encourage other people to not buy this game? You're just going to result in the franchise that you so allegedly love to just shut down again. And again, I feel like that's such a slippery slope because I hate that mentality of, well, let's support this so we can get what we want down the road. I understand it. It's just like when, Super Monkey Ball is kind of trying to come back, and instead of remaking 1 and 2, they remade Banana Blitz. And there was that whole mentality of, oh, well, if you want the remake of 1 and 2, you better buy this one that you don't want. And I get that, and I hate that mentality, but I don't feel it's to that effect in this scenario. This is not an abomination. This is not them giving us a bad game by any means. This is them giving a full remake, a full graphical overhaul, a mishmash between OG Ninja Gaiden 2 and Sigma 2, and it's a good blend. It is not unfair. It looks great. It runs great. It has quality of life improvements. This is a good game and a good version of a good game. I think it's an amazing game. I still think the game holds up. If you want my thoughts on Ninja Gaiden 2, feel free to check out my other video. I'm not going to review the whole game here, but suffice it to say, from what I've played so far, just as good as I remembered it. And I just replayed Ninja Gaiden 2 literally last month, so it's still fresh in my brain. But I feel this problem permeates to every series, really. If something's not exactly the way that someone remembers it or wants it, the whole series is gone. And again, this does have validity. For example, in cases such as Control, Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces came out and it was just following, Unleashed, Colors, and Generations. And then we had kind of a weird episode there with Lost World and Boom. But then you have Forces come out right after, and it's very evidently a direct follow-up to those old Boost games. But Forces, level design was compromised, Control was stripped, and they focused on They focused on different things, and it wasn't what people wanted. That criticism, I feel, was very warranted because people were upset that they changed a fundamental component of the game. I really don't feel like Ninja Gaiden 2 Black changed a fundamental component of the game. They didn't change the control, they just balanced difficulty. And I suppose if that's the biggest problem to you with the game, fine. But I still do feel that people do this far too often now. For it, like, the biggest thing that I'm thinking of course, with me is Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 16 got what I believe was the most unnecessary, undeserved, unwarranted hate out of any modern release. And even worse than hate, it just got almost no attention. Nobody talks about it even now. I still believe, even as a non-Final Fantasy fan, even as a, non-RPG fan, that's an amazing game. Undeniably. I don't know how you play through the demo of Final Fantasy 16 and feel nothing. If you really don't like it after the demo, fine, I guess you don't like it. But I'd argue if you play the demo, you're gonna love it. The majority of the hate that I see towards that game is nonsensical. And it truly comes down to the fact that fans are upset that the series has moved away from turn-based combat. And I don't want to get too into the weeds here with a completely different game topic, but it's something like that where it's just another example of a game that does so much right, but there's one part that people can't move past. And because of that, the entire game is ruined in the eyes of so many people. Because how many people out there didn't even try Final Fantasy 16 because of one small thing? It's not right that a game that is that good is going for that cheap, that is not getting spoken about that much, that's not getting the flowers I feel it so rightfully deserves. And that's why when you have situations like this, fans that are, I'm all for criticism, I'm all for critiquing, reviewing games, but actively encouraging people not to support a series you love, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And yeah, that's all I got. I just think this is an insane response. Ninja Gaiden 2 Black is an amazing game. It's an amazing version of an amazing game. And similarly, Final Fantasy 16, an amazing entry and an amazing series that always is innovating and trying new things anyway. So I don't know why it was a shock that it would try something new this time. But who knows? Gamers are a weird breed, and I'm one of them. So that's about it for me. Later, guys.